All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick will be doing our 2024 preview and prediction for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Looking at his coaching staff, Greg Schiano enters his fifth year already in his second tenure with the school. Kirk Kararoka, second year in the role as the OC, and Joe Harazmaya, third year as the DC. The Schiano rebuild seems to be in full effect as they're coming off their first winning season, that is, and bowl win since 2014. Look at the offensive side of the ball, Nick. It's a bit of a disaster. You look at some of the numbers, especially yards and passing yards per game. They're just not great. They returned 7 starters on top of 4 guys they added in the portal. The offensive line did rank top 15 in fewest sacks in TFL allowed. And that's the big reason why this offense was able to help win them games was because of Kyle Mungai in this rushing attack. An explosive runner with nice lateral burst, some suddenness to his game, has good long speed, has good feel for opposing defenders, was very productive for the situation he was in, I would say, in terms of a one-dimensional offense. 5'9", 210. Samuel Brown was the third leading rusher. He had a few touches per game, only averaged about 3.5 yards per touch, though. 6'1", 225, considered a more physical back. Then Jashawn Benjamin played a few snaps as well as a true freshman. Not an overwhelming room here, but they are happy to get back an experienced bunch overall. And Mongai's pretty much the whole story here, Nick. Over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns. Whenever Gavin Wimsatt was here, he had 11 touchdowns as well, so they certainly had a nice goal line running. Wimsatt is now gone. What do you think this running game is going to do now that those legs of Gavin are now, out of the picture? But for a rushing attack that was good, it wasn't, just against the FCS schools. They had 232 against Ohio State in a game they played very tough in.
Without Wimsatt, this rushing attack certainly loses a leg, and if Mungai was gone, this rushing attack would be in complete trouble, and Rutgers as a team would be in complete trouble. But they returned him in his 1,200 yards production, 5.2 yards per carry, and 8 scores for him as well. This was an offensive unit that wasn't very productive, but the 168.6 yards per game on the ground was a really solid number overall. They're going to rely a lot on the running game, and they're going to rely on Mungai, 5'9", 210, which is interesting when you look at that size there. They also have Samuel Brown behind him, who got some touches last year, 16 yards and 2 scores for Brown, who will be getting a little bit more of the load this year. They don't have a running quarterback with the quarterback they picked up in the portal in former Minnesota quarterback Athan Kalmaklakis, who's going to take over and be the starting quarterback for this offense, which you will get to in a second. Overall, though, I think if this team continue to run the ball efficiently and behind this very strong offensive line, they'll be just fine, be able to grind out low-scoring games. This is going to be a team that's going to be run first, pass second. That's a theme that's going to continue into this year. It worked last year at times. Can it work again this year? I think that's the big question mark down there in New Jersey.
Yeah, this is a team the last 2 years. I remember I said that I felt like they should have been accomplishing more on the ground game. They finally were able to, hold serve on that, getting up to 56 nationally. And you do look at the upper part of the unit. Athan Kalmaklakis, comes over, forcing Gavin Wimsatt out. I don't really understand what happened there. Slight upgrade, though, in terms of caliber of arm, but he was pretty horrid in terms of accuracy and production. Johnny Shepard, he got on the field versus Wagner, a player Schiano said they're happy with to keep developing. Him and Colin O'Sullivan, both redshirt freshmen. And this is a team that just doesn't seem very serious about upgrading their skill positions, Nick. They did make a nice little add in Demary Miller, who was an elite receiver from Monmouth, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns last year. They do return their own top pass catcher and Christian Dremel, who had at least 1 catch in each game. Nazim Brantley expected to step into the starting lineup. Didn't play last season after spending time at 2 different FCS schools in the years prior. Ian Strong is a true freshman, was 4th on the team in receiving. Nice size of 6'3", 210. Only other guy I'm really seeing who had production last year was senior Chris Long, who had 2 receptions for 28 in the season opener, and then due to injury was out for the rest of the season. Think he ends up being a pretty solid breakout player for them. Not really a good room. Haven't been all that aggressive again, Nick, in improving it, and they've resorted to lower-level players to pick up a starter here. What is the vision with the rest of this offense? Because, again, this is now the 5th year for Schiano, and the improvement just doesn't seem to be very aggressive.
There isn't a whole lot of vision that I can see. Bringing back Dremel, I think, is really solid. 468 yards receiving and 3 scores for him. Ian Strong, 230 and 2 scores for him. But outside of that, they don't really return a whole lot of production in general. This is a team that doesn't really have a vision for the passing attack, right? This is a unit that doesn't really have an incredible amount of names. Yes, they added Miller from Monmouth, who could really be solid, a nice in-state ad with the 9 touchdowns he had at the FCS level. But overall, this is a team that's going to continue to rely on running the ball, kind of an old-school offense. They're no Iowa compared to how bad Iowa is, but they are not going to light up the scoreboard, certainly through the air, 137 pass yards per game. That's going to be kind of where they are again this year. They're going to continue to rely on running the ball, ground and pound, and have that defense that's going to kill you. I think it's not necessarily a problem considering this team doesn't really have, playoff ambitions. They don't really seem to be chasing that. They just want to make a bowl game every single year under Shiano. And I think if you run the ball efficiently and have a really strong defense, you'll be able to do so. So I'm not super worried about the Scarlet Knights offense if they continue to find a way to run the ball behind a strong offensive line.
And that's what they should do. Holland Pierre gets things going on the left side. Enters his 4th year as a starter, first 2 at right tackle, this past season at left tackle. And it was his best yet. 6'8", 345-pounder, was heavily improved in the run blocking game. Was stout and pass pro as well. Really happy with Pierce on that side. Brian Felter enters his 5th year in the program, hasn't allowed a single sack. This past season was his first as a starter at left guard. Gus Zelinskas was an admirable center. Hoping he can make some good improvements. They had 3 different guys play 100-plus snaps at right guard. It was a pretty revolving door there. Kwabena Asamoah seems primed to be the starter. He's in a battle with Reggie Sutton, though, who was primarily the right tackle, and he was flat out horrid in that role. Tyler Needham will probably return to the starting right tackle position he played well in for 2 games early on in the season before an injury took him down as well. So Rutgers is assuming that position will see increased performance there at right tackle. Good amount of experience they have starting, and the backups also got a year in the program. Quality unit here. I think they'll continue to improve. Again, Nick, they're top 15 in fewest sacks and TFL allowed. And of course, they paved the way for Mongai to be effective. So this offensive line, I think, is a pretty underrated unit.
I like this unit a whole lot. I think Holland Pierce is an incredibly underrated player, one of the top offensive line pieces in the conference, if not in the country, at left tackle. A 4-year starter who's really solid. Big size, really big physical player, nice hands, good footwork as well, really solid in run blocking. I think Felter's a good player, a really solid veteran that they have on this offensive line at left guard. That left side is very, very strong. I think center play was solid last year. I think the right side was solid. Tyler Needham was really good at right tackle. I like what they can do at this point in time. He was solid before he got hurt. This is a really strong offensive line that is able to pave the way for a very dominant rushing attack. I like this offensive line a lot, and to continue to progress and be a dominant unit.
The verdict for the side of the ball, Mongai and a good offensive line is going to be the headline here. And again, this run game had some pretty strong games this season ago, and that's going to be the idea in 2024. Nothing's going to change anywhere else. Passing game will maybe have a slight uptick, but also may see more turnovers in the process. I think overall they're going to show marginal improvements. In the games against Michigan, Iowa, and Penn State, they had 7 points or less in all of those games, including a shutout to Iowa. So obviously, units are going to struggle significantly against the tougher opponents. They were able to put up 31, though, against Miami. So, the elite opponents have them. Maybe not some of the upper tiers, though, altogether. On the defensive side of the ball, like you said, you want to talk about the vision here. And it's just play great defense, right? And, be, solid on the other side of the ball. And they're finally starting to really click. 21.2 points per game in terms of yards. They weren't giving up a whole lot. They lost 7 guys in the portal. Landed only 1. They returned 8 starters. Top tackler Deion Jennings is gone. The defensive line, a veteran unit leads the way. Aaron Lewis is an exceptional pass rusher, 10 QB hurries each of the last 2 years. Definitely want to see him find home more often, but he's a disruptor nonetheless. On the other side, Wesley Bailey didn't quite play as strong as expected, is also best at rushing the passer. Showed a big fall off versus the run last season, though. Certainly want to see him play with more consistency. Keontae Hamilton, 6'4", 295. A quality defensive tackle in the middle versus the run. That lone transfer being Malcolm Wright from Florida State, 6'2", 292-pound interior defensive rotational piece for the Noles from Florida State, that is, will take on a larger role here. Zerai Anagi at 315 pounds, saw a solid amount of snaps. You also look at the guy in Troy Rainey at 295, also says some good time. Should see better work out of this interior defensive line this season and the pass rush, Nick. A lot of experience on this side of the ball. Again, the only transfer they brought in, they must feel can make an impact, or they wouldn't have brought him in.
Malcolm Wright really could be that big impact player they brought in from the portal. I like what he can do. Not a whole lot of experience, a rotational piece of Florida State, but at 6'2", 292, a really good player that can take on a larger role and be involved. Look at him to break out and be a solid player this year for this team. I do like him a lot. Aaron Lewis is a really good player for this team. 51 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Like the numbers there at defensive end. I think he's a guy that could really continue to step up and be a nice veteran. Keontae Hamilton, I like what I've seen out of him. 28 total tackles, 1 each in terms of sacks and tackles for loss for him. I think he's primed for another year of step-up potential there. Wesley Bailey coming off the edge, 27 total tackles, 4.5 tackles loss, 4 sacks, 3 pass breakups. A do-it-all player off the edge. Really nice speed from him. I really do like what you see out of him. A guy that's a good leader. Again, in the locker room, another guy that could really play strong this year, in my opinion. Overall, I do think this front part of this defense has some solid pieces. They added Ray, who I think could be a really nice impact add. I like what this front part of this defense can do.
This 4-3 also sees a pretty good linebacking core led by Mohamed Toure. He was a big loss for them in 22. I think it was a torn ACL that put him down all year long for that. He returned last season. He was the best player on this defense, strong in all areas, made a lot of negative plays. He was an impressive tackler. Also created some waves as a pass rusher and was even an asset in coverage. Tareem Powell was having a good season through 8 games before an injury. He's really improved as a run defender. Abraham Wright and Moses Walker back them up. I think, players I think the staff is confident in. And this is a group, again, that's just developed so greatly. Torrey, of course, his brother's in the NFL, so a lot of good genes there. This run defense, they gave up 100 plus in almost every single game this year. I think it's about 8-9 different games they gave up in. But they're not getting scorched on the ground, Nick, and it's mainly because of what this front seven is able to accomplish. They looked sound against Ohio State on the ground. Michigan State, they held in check. Iowa and Penn State had a little bit more success, but for the most part, this is a competitive front seven that's only going to get better.
This is a competitive front seven that will continue to get better. I think Torrey is an incredible add, 93 total tackles, a return that is an incredible return after missing 2022. Had a really solid season, looked comfortable coming back from that bad injury, 93 total tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, a pick, and 2 pass breakups for him. He's a really good leader for this defense, a veteran player, solid in the locker room. Powell, I like him as well. 53 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. In general, they return some other nice depth down at the bottom in Abraham Wright and Moses Walker, 2 guys that could potentially be in line for steps up this year. I like this linebacker unit. I like this front part of this defense a lot. This is a very strong unit against the run, and I expect a similar thing again this year.
In the secondary unit, we really pleased last year. And again, they've been stacked for a couple of seasons now. They do lose a good corner, got drafted to Max Melton, but his counterpart from last year, and Robert Longerbeam, is coming off his best season. But he's always been a consistent player for this team in coverage. Eric Rogers was solid last fall, getting on the field a good bit. Now assumes a larger role. Their backups in Bo Mascow and Zalon Williams only saw a few snaps each. The rest of the starting secondary, those loaded with experience. Desmond Igbason was returned to the slot, was a real productive tackler, sound versus the run, didn't allow much in coverage, but could cut down on the allowed yards after catch. The versatility from Shaquan Loyal is very valuable, playing most of his snaps in the slot, but shown the skills to provide wherever he is asked. I think Flip Dixon, he's going to start at the other safety spot. He was exceptional last year in coverage, showed his muscle as a tackler as well. Depth in back end's pretty iffy, but overall this is a strong part of this team. If they can stay healthy, these starters are going to provide a lot, Nick. And I think they could probably compete with most people in the country. Not just because of the scheme, but the way they coach them up, I think is very impressive. Only a 59.8% completion rating allowed last year. 2,200 yards, 16 touchdowns, and they snagged 9 picks as well. This is a good secondary.
Love the secondary. Michael Dixon, or Flip Dixon as he's known, 76 total tackles, 6 pass breakups, 2 tackles for loss. For him, really solid numbers for this guy, Shaquan Loyal. 66 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups. Igmason, 64 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack for him. Longerbeam, 43 total tackles, 1 each in terms of tackles for loss, and sacked 10 pass breakups. Really solid in coverage, a good leader in coverage. Eric Rogers, underrated with 19 total tackles and 6 pass breakups down for him as well. This is a very good secondary unit. They were really solid against the pass, top 10 pass defense in the nation. I think they'll be in line to be another top 10 unit again this year. Really nice experience. The depth, yes, a little iffy at times, but in general, I love this unit. I think this defense is a very strong defense that can really lead the way for this team.
Defensive verdict here. Rutgers is a very strong defense from top to bottom. Schiano excels at getting each player to thrive in their respective roles. They showed the ability to crack some of the tougher offenses, but they weren't perfect, and they'll need to continue in terms of improving tenacity, physicality, and, of course, depth. Overall, this is a team that certainly can compete with them on that side of the ball. Look at the prediction. Rutgers seems like they're becoming the new Iowa, Nick, because the offense is pretty weak on top of a defense that gives them a shot against really anyone in the country, it seems. Run game and the offensive line is impressive. They're going to need to find some better balance to be considered a serious threat for some higher accomplishments. 6-6 for me. I think this is a marginally difficult schedule. Virginia Tech will be tough. Some of the losses I have in conference won't be easy. Even, beating Illinois, UCLA. It's not going to be an easy task. 6-6 for me. You have 7-5. We both have them achieving postseason, eligibility here, which is crazy to say for an offense that again is a C and is not going to be much better. But again, Nick, I think new Iowa is kind of the way to describe this here, and Schiano's great with that. Developing guys, winning football games, having fun. I think all the boxes are checked in that regard, and that's going to be, leading to a successful program, one that's really not going to be expected to accomplish a whole lot.
As someone who has close ties to this program, closely observes it, follows it along, has friends, that are big Rutgers fans, been in the area, grew up in near, not too far from the campus my entire life. I'm a fan of this team and excited to see what they can do this year. I think this is a team that's very exciting to watch on defense. Yes, the offense struggles a little bit. I have them in the postseason again. That's the goal really in Piscataway, right? Get to a bowl game. We saw that last year. They played a bowl game close to home at Yankee Stadium and beat Miami and really ended off the season on a strong note. I am at 7-5 this year. I think this is a team that's defense is very dominant. Yes, the offense attack is not phenomenal, but they'll be able to run the ball and ground and pound you. I wouldn't be surprised to pick off another upset here, potentially, Wisconsin maybe, or Maryland potentially as well. I have them beating Minnesota. That's the one game where you and I differ. I like this team a lot this year, certainly on defense. I think they're a very exciting defense. I think Schiano is continuing to prove that he was the right rehire when he was brought back in town. I think he's done a really good job. He's strengthening the trenches. The trenches are fantastically strong here. Yes, the quarterback play, yes, the wide receiving play is not phenomenal, but I think the running back game will be just as strong as it was last year, even without Wimsatt, who was really solid at running the ball. I think this team will have a successful year at 7-5. That's a very successful year for most Rutgers fans. This program's not a laughing stock anymore. They're a consistently solid program that's trending towards being in a bowl game pretty much every single year. I like the direction they're heading down there in Piscataway.
That's me for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me talking about Rutgers here. Bit of an underrated team, but like you said, one that could potentially shake things up for other opponents. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.